Nadine Dorries has once again taken to the airwaves to bolster her case for privatising Channel 4. And speaking to Ian Dale on LBC, she used the example of Channel 5 to make her case.
Now, say who's done that really well since they were privatised a small number of years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, 5 years ago maybe, is Channel 5. If you look at the amount of investment Channel 5 puts into the regions and how well Channel 5 has done since it's been privatised, I think that's a model. I call Channel 5 the levelling up broadcaster. That is a model for how broadcasting can work.
We could debate whether or not Dorries is right that Channel 5 really is the levelling up broadcaster. But there's a more glaring problem with what she said in that clip. That's because, contrary to a claim she repeated twice, Channel 5 was never privatised. And that's for the simple reason that it was never publicly owned. Channel 5 was launched in 1997 as a private company, and it's been a private company ever since. Unfortunately, Ian Dale didn't pick Dorries up on the mistake. Otherwise, we would perhaps have been able to enjoy another moment like this.
I would argue that to say that just because Channel 4 has been established as a public service broadcaster and just because it's in receipt of public money, we should never kind of audit the future of Channel 4 and we should never evaluate how Channel 4 looks in the future and whether or not it's a sustainable and viable model. It's quite right that the government should do that.
But Channel 4 is not like the BBC. It's not in receipt of licence fee money. It makes its money from commercial operations.
And so, although it's,
I mean, there are a range of views. Obviously, Channel 4 has taken a particular position on the future.
So can I just say that the discussions about what we do with Channel 4 and how we evaluate Channel 4 also happened before I arrived in my post.
That was from a select committee meeting last November. Aaron, have you ever in your life seen a frontbench politician who openly knows less about their brief than Nadine Dorries?
No, I mean, it's kind of bad actually, Michael, now, because I see terrible stories about her and I see people sharing clips on Twitter of her saying something utterly ludicrous. And I just think, why bother? This is like mocking a child. And I know that sounds really mean, but honestly, I was like, oh, Nadine Dorries, it's something absolutely moronic and nonsensical. Okay, well, what day of the week is it? And does it end in a Y? People need to know that we have really incompetent politicians. They need to know that. And I think Nadine Dorries, she's just so brazen about it. The wonk, the civil servant, was trying to bail her out. Even then, she's like, no, let me make a fool of myself for 20 seconds longer. It's incredible. I mean, it's like we have one every week. Maybe we need a new podcast just about Nadine Dorries saying stupid shit.
Obviously, if this was just an ordinary member of the public, then the fact that they don't have much knowledge about how the media works or whether or not you say tennis courts or tennis pitches, these things wouldn't matter. We wouldn't want to be mocking someone for sort of lapses of knowledge of that sort. But this is the person who is literally in charge of culture, media and sport in this country. And also isn't just sort of playing a caretaker role. She's trying to revolutionize the media in this country, selling off Channel 4, very, very significant policy move. And she hasn't bothered to learn the bare minimum about any of it. And I feel like if you were going to try and shake things up, lots of people's jobs on the line here. It's a very, very significant decision to make. The bare minimum you can do, even as a matter of courtesy, is learn how the goddamn organization works before you tear it to shreds.
The creative industries in this country are worth hundreds of billions of pounds. These are huge industries which she's interfering in. I mean, I suppose the best analog would be, imagine if you had a Labour government, a left-wing Labour government, and they said, we're going to reform the City of London. We're going to make the Bank of England subject to government oversight. It's going to lose its nominal independence. It's not independent really, but it's nominal independence. We're going to have interest rates set by the Chancellor of the Exchequer. We're going to do really, really big things in terms of reforming economic policy. And somebody said, well, what are interest rates right now? I said, I don't know, maybe 20, 30%? Okay, you don't know what interest rates are. Okay, what's inflation measure? Inflation, don't know, sorry. That's basically Nadine Dorries, but it's been transposed to, like you say, culture, media, sport. The Tories don't care about these things anyway. They never have done, right? This has always been the most sort of Mickey Mouse department under the Conservatives because they love law and order, they love finance, because none of them in DCMS can go on to get nice, cushy lobbying jobs afterwards. They don't have the grace and favour homes that you get with being foreign secretary, home secretary, defence secretary. You get to hang out with the military. those are the jobs they love. Or if you're really politically ambitious, you might have a junior role like Veterans Affairs. You could make a bit of a name for yourself. No, DCMS, culture, the arts, these are all lefties anyway. We can't please them. They always want more. I find it very strange, however, that it's Nadine Dorries who is the kind of the revolutionary that they've placed in that department. Before you had John Whittingdale, who was a hardcore Thatcherite and who's seen as, again, he was an ideologue, but he thought about how you can apply market systems to the BBC, etc. And actually, in the end, when they renewed the BBC Charter a few years ago, when he was there, it wasn't as bad as people feared. And then he's given way, and I don't like him, I don't agree with his politics, but he's not a complete fool. He's then given way to Nadine Dorries. You need to explain this to me, Michael. What's her function? Is it to make Boris Johnson look smart? That's the only thing I can kind of make out of this is, okay, let's have this kind of bolshy, obstreperous, confrontational person talking complete nonsense. And if we have them there, they'll make enough stories and kick up enough of a stink that we can do some more stuff on the side, and the media won't really talk about it.
What do you do to make yourself look less of an idiot? You put someone who's willing, because it's not just that she is an idiot when it comes to answering questions about media, culture and sport. She's really, really willing to go out there. She's a real fighter. She's a trooper for Boris Johnson. When he's done completely ridiculous things, when he sort of talked about Keir Starmer in Parliament and Jimmy Savile, it was Nadine Dorries who was willing to go on Channel 4 News and just keep repeating, the Prime Minister wouldn't lie. The Prime Minister wouldn't lie. The Prime Minister wouldn't lie. And that is a great person to have in your team because they're willing to absorb all of that flack. And also it's kind of helpful if the person who's willing to absorb that flack is in charge of a sort of function which people don't really consider when they're making their vote. Obviously, you don't want your Chancellor to look like a complete idiot because people might then not vote for your party. You also probably don't want your Defence Secretary to look like a complete idiot if what you're trying to say is, we're strong on national security. But if the person who you go out whose function is to look like an idiot is in charge of sport and culture, no one thinks that sport's going to disappear all of a sudden, right? So I think they think it's a low stakes department, and you're right, she can take that flack. Let's get onto the more substantial issue of policy and the potential prospects for a privatised Channel 4. You might remember when Nadine Dorries first announced the plan, she cited this as her key motivation. She says, "I have come to the conclusion that government ownership is holding Channel 4 back from competing against streaming giants like Netflix and Amazon." Now, of course, this was always a silly idea. There is no way Channel 4 can compete with the budgets of Netflix and Amazon. You can see here the total annual spend on content from Netflix, Amazon, the BBC and Channel 4. So Netflix in 2021 spent £13.5 billion on content. Amazon Prime, £10.3 billion. BBC Television, now in 2020, £1.4 billion was their annual spend. And Channel 4 spent £522 million. So Netflix is spending 26 times as much as Channel 4, and Nadine Dorries thinks they can compete. They can charge $8.99 just as Netflix charges $8.99, even though 26 times the amount of money is spent on Netflix content. It's not particularly plausible. It's also worth noting that unlike Channel 4, Amazon Prime's video service doesn't even need to break even. They're playing to different rules. Amazon Prime Video is a loss leader to drive people to purchase other goods from Amazon. Channel 4 couldn't do that, privatized or not. Netflix, for its part, does make a profit. That was $1.6 billion in the first 3 months of this year. But even Netflix, which is the big giant, the big incumbent, their business model is under threat. In the first quarter of this year, and for the first time ever, Netflix lost subscribers. And that has caused its share price to fall by 49% in the past month, by half. You can see the big drop here happened on the 20th of April after Netflix announced that fall in subscribers. So obviously, this is a business model where you need constant growth. The moment you can't demonstrate constant growth, everything collapses like a house of cards. Aaron, do you think the Tories genuinely believe that a privatised Channel 4 can compete with Netflix? And if they did, should it want to? Is this a competition Channel 4 should be entering into in the first place?
It's funny. Come on. Also, when I look at Netflix, they're spending $13.5 billion on content creation. How many Ted Bundy series can that create? How many weird true crime dramas? Just $13.5 billion, Michael. That's a big old budget just for inventing Anna and the Ozarks, and there's not that much good TV. I'm kind of with Elon Musk on Netflix. I'm not a fan. I don't dislike it for the same reasons he does, though. I just don't think it's very good. Like you say, by comparison, Channel 4 have a budget of $500 million. Apple, I just said them, about $6.5 billion. So that wasn't included in that image there. All of these organizations have huge, huge budgets. Amazon so far this year have lost 200,000 subscribers in the UK. Streaming platforms more broadly have lost 1.5 million in 2022. Now, that's partly explicable because, of course, people are going out more. So previously they may have had 3 or 4 streaming subscriptions. Now they just have 1 or 2. They don't have the literal time to watch all that content. But it's also partly because it's a saturated market. And this is a very common phenomenon in capitalist markets. You have a profitable industry. You have investment flood into it, and then you have market saturation. And at a certain point, you have such market saturation that a number of the firms involved in that particular market are no longer profitable. They collapse. So a good analog here is, for instance, coffee shops. It became very clear at the beginning of the 2000s that high street coffee chains were very profitable. You see Costas and Starbucks and Caffè Neros and Pretz offer coffee and sandwiches on pretty much every high street in the UK. London Bridge, you've got like 4 Pret-a-Manger's on one street, and that's a saturated market. What happens, of course, is your margins get lower, you have high competition, and a few of those companies then go out of business or they have to shrink. I think inevitably what we'll see with streaming is the exact same thing. So in 2022, globally, the figures you just showed are for 2021, globally, the expectation is that $100 billion will go on content creation for the big streaming platforms. So Apple TV, Disney, Netflix, Amazon Prime, $100 billion. So that seems to me like the perfect set of circumstances for a saturated market. Why on earth would you take the BBC and Channel 4, which have existed and worked very well and acted in the public interest for decades, in the case of the BBC, far longer, but iPlayer has been an outstanding product for decades. Why on earth would you look at that scenario where realistically a few of those platforms aren't going to survive the next 5 to 10 years by virtue of what we're seeing? Why would you look at that and say, you know what, I want a piece of that. I want a piece of that. How about we get iPlayer or Channel 4 to collapse in the next 5, 10 years too? That's a great idea. By the way, the proposal right now, I should be clear, is just for Channel 4, but the Tories have said the same thing about the BBC previously. So it's a disaster in the making. At the same time, I should be clear, Michael, people have talked about Channel 4 and its historic role in British filmmaking and how it was making such original avant-garde programming in the 80s and the 90s. True. But its stuff now, let's be honest, Channel 4 stuff now is crap. It's often been bigoted, it's been racist, lowest common denominator, cheap to make, stacked high, crud, which in no way resembles, public service broadcast. I'm not one of these people who's going to defend Channel 4 and pretend it's something which it's not, because it isn't. I don't think it in any way resembles the organization we saw 15, 20 years ago. But also, you're almost guaranteeing its collapse by saying it should take on the likes of Netflix and Apple TV, because, like you say, these are huge companies. Apple and Amazon are $1 trillion businesses. I don't know what their market capitalization is right now, but they've been $1 trillion businesses. There's not many of those. Tesla as well is $1 trillion business. I think Facebook's a $500 billion business. But the idea that Channel 4, rinky-dink Channel 4, can compete against $1 trillion business, which, like you say, can lose money year after year after year after year to sink its competitors, which is why, by the way, I think Amazon and Apple will win this with a saturated market, and they'll be happy to lose money for 5, 10 years if it sinks Netflix. I think Netflix is a problem in that respect. In any case, that's Clash of the Titans, and then you've got Channel 4. Britain is an important content creator of English-speaking cultural products globally. We obviously punch above our weight, as people love to say. And so I think this should be a perfect moment looking at those platforms to say, look, Channel 4, BBC should be able to do something really distinctive in the public interest. We've got all these series on Netflix, which only ever go to 2 series because it's optimized for eyeballs rather than actually a narrative story which makes sense. Let's be unique and offer products which actually appeal to people and resonate with them as programming for a long time. Opportunity missed.
Why doesn't Elon Musk like Netflix? What was that about?
I think he referred to Netflix as having the woke brain virus.